Before we get started, I would like to know who we have with us today, so I'm going to in a moment unmute your line. If you will briefly introduce yourself, please give your name, state, and the years or months that you've been with the Ombudsman program. Just 1 second, and I will unmute your line. If you can make sure that your phone is muted until you speak, that would be great. But everyone is unmuted on my end. So Jim, you're up first on my list if you want to get us started. Or how about Karen? Do you want to introduce your name, state? Thank you.
Karen Gilliland from Indiana.
Great, thank you. And you're the interim state ombudsman, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Karen Price, maybe next? Okay, well, just to speed this along, I will let you know who's on the phone. I'll go ahead and mute everybody. We have Joe Rodriguez, Karen Price, Melanie McNeil, Sarah Hunt, and Sarah will unmute you later during the Q&A, and Teresa Ritter, and Joe Rodriguez. And of course, we have Lori, Aaliyah, and myself. So thank you again for joining us. I'm sure that we'll have some other folks join later in the call. To give you an overview of today's call, Aaliyah is going to provide us with a review of the NORC website, and then I'm going to talk about some fundamental NORC resources and how to use them in your work, not just during your first 2 years as a new state ombudsman, but also how you can support your local ombudsman with some of these resources. And then Lori's going to talk about our current and future NORC work, because as you may know, we just wrapped up a year of our 3-year grant year, our grant cycle. And then we'll have Q&A, which is time for you to ask any questions that you have of NORC staff and consultants that are on the line today, and that includes Sarah Hunt, who's with us. And then you'll also have time to ask questions of your mentors or other experienced state ombudsmen that are on the line. And then we'll close out, and I will share some reminders at the end of the call. So just as a reminder, what exactly is NORC? NORC, we are funded by the Administration on Aging, and just like I said, it's a 3-year grant. We are operated by the Consumer Voice in cooperation with the National Association of States United for Aging and Disabilities, otherwise known as NASHUAD. We provide support, technical assistance, and training to both state and local long-term care ombudsmen. And what we're going to talk about this afternoon is all about the type of training, technical assistance, and support that we provide. So I'm going to take just one moment and transfer the controls over to Aaliyah so she can guide us through the website. All right, Aaliyah, you're up. Thank you. And make sure to unmute your line. Let's see here. There you go.
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
And you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So like Amity said, I am going to take you through a quick walkthrough of the login side of the NORC website. Hopefully you all are a little familiar with the different components of the website, and you've seen that when we send you a welcome letter from NORC, that it includes login information to access the State Ombudsman only side of the website. So I'm going to take you quickly through how to log into that part of the website, what type of information is on there, and specifically what type of information is on there for new State Ombudsman. So as you can see here, this is the home page for the NORC website. And to access the State Ombudsman login side, you go up to the top here, click on the login button, and enter in your username and password that I sent you. And if you ever can't find that email or have forgotten what your username or password is, just feel free to contact us at NORC and we'll be able to send you that information again. So, once you log in, you'll see along the top here that you continue to have access to the entire NORC site, but you now have access to the login side, which is for State Ombudsman only, and you can access the different menu items here, or from the left-hand side of the State Ombudsman homepage. So the information on this homepage, a couple of things. You can access a current list of all of the State Ombudsman with their contact information and emails right here. And I typically send this out at least once a month through email, but it's also located on this homepage here. And that looks like this. And I ask if you're on here, or usually when I send it out, I ask you to just check your listing and make sure that all the information is up to date and to send me any additional information. And this list is helpful in case you have a question for a fellow State Ombudsman, or you saw a new resource that a different program sent out and you want to ask about that resource. You can go here and find their contact information. Okay, and you'll see from our homepage the different menu items that go off. Again, reiterating, this part of the website is just for State Ombudsman, so we post information, resources, webinars that pertain particularly to your role. So as a new State Ombudsman, a really good link to go to is along the side here, our new State Ombudsman homepage. So when we created this, we tried to think through your first couple of days to months on the job and the type of information that would be most helpful for you as you kind of get started. So we broke it down into 5 basic steps that are all located on this page here. So the first one, you can get to each step by clicking on these links or just scrolling down. So the first step, getting to know the basics, takes you to the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman online training curriculum. So this is to give you a good background in just the Ombudsman program basics. So if you click on here, it takes you to our curriculum that we've developed, and this is the same thing as the printed State Ombudsman curriculums that you get in that big binder in your offices. We've just translated it into an online form. So there's 3 different modules here, and they mirror the NORC curriculum that's for all ombudsmen, but they just have extra things for State Ombudsman, including key points or tips. There's also questions for you to be thinking about as you make your way through these different modules. And the modules are designed to get you, to give you a deep understanding of the history of the program, to ground you in ombudsman thinking and about residents' rights and the problem-solving process. Again, in each section, it gives you tips as a State Ombudsman how to think through these different modules. So going back to our new State Ombudsman page, after getting to know the basics, the next step is how to understand and assess your particular program. And in this section, you'll find one of our resources, which is a self-evaluation and quality improvement tool that you could use to you're new to your program, you kind of want to see what your strengths and weaknesses are. So we've developed a tool to help you kind of go through different indicators to see where those strengths and weaknesses may lie. And Amity will talk a little bit more about these tools in her presentation. There's also resources in this section on how to understand your program data. So it links here to all of the training modules for the NORC data, as well as the NORC data tables and different resources on how to understand program data. So the next step is to build key relationships. So in this section, we've included information on different players in the aging world that you may come into contact with, as well as all of our resources along, for example, this one here, on synchronicity between State Ombudsman and local ombudsman programs. So you'll find information and resources on how to start building those relationships in your state. Our next section covers understanding your program funding. So a really cool resource in this section is our Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program Management Highlights chart. And for those of you who attended the State Ombudsman Conference, that's the chart that we print out in big form that we ask folks to fill out. And it basically goes through different funding structures and which states are under those structures. It'll list different issues that states work on, and it shows you which states cover those. And so it's to give you a sense, if you have a question and you want to find a state that maybe has the same structure as you and is dealing with that issue, you can see which states are and reach out to those ombudsmen. And then finally, our last section covers systems advocacy and how to start thinking about that and what to do in your state around that. So we have different resources, a quick reference guide, different sessions we've done in the past around systems advocacy. And then finally, we have key resources that we feel would be helpful for you as you start in your role. So these include the Older Americans Act, all of the nursing home reform law provisions, and different resources like that in this section. Okay, and also helpful for new state ombudsmen, we post all of our conference calls and webinars, and this one will be included, that we do for new state ombudsmen, as well as the in-person orientations that we do twice a year at the State Ombudsman Conference in the spring, and then at the Consumer Voice Conference in the fall. All of the resources, all of the handouts and the recordings are posted right here. And that's how that looks like. And then the in-person orientations are right under there. So other information you can find on the State Ombudsman login side. If you click on support, you'll find where we post all of our summary sheets. So I'm sure you've seen that I usually send out probably 2 or 3 times a month a question from a state ombudsman who has encountered an issue in their state and wants to know how other states handle that same issue. So what I do is take their question, put it in an email form, send it out to everyone, and I take everyone's responses and put it into a summary sheet. So for example, a question that we received in April of this year was on unlicensed care homes. And so the question is at the top, how many states responded, in a summary of their responses here, and then each individual state's response with how to contact them. And so the issues covered, we've organized them into different sections. So if you have a question, you can always, of course, ask us, but if you want to maybe do a little research first, the summary sheet section is a really great place to start and to see how different states have handled that issue in the past. And on this page, we keep summary sheets from 2000 and I think it is 11 to the present. But there's also archived summary sheets that go back as far as the 90s in the archived summary sheets section here. And just again, you'll notice too when I send out information around summary sheets or information that's included on just the login side, we ask that you don't share that information widely, because some of the information in the summary sheets when different states respond, we want the state ombudsman to be able to respond candidly, and they might want to talk about issues that are going on in their states that they don't necessarily want spread widely. So when we send out these summary sheets, that's why we ask you to, if you're going to share the information, don't give access to the login side. Share specific parts of the summary sheets and not necessarily the whole sheet. And if you ever have any questions about what you think is appropriate to share outside of the State Ombudsman Network, you can always contact NORC and ask us. So other information that we have on the login side are letters and guidance from the Administration on Aging. We also post survey and certification letters from CMS. All of our training on NORC is located here, as well as resources that State Ombudsmen have shared or different conference calls and webinars that we've done around program funding, as well as program effectiveness and quality assurance just for State Ombudsmen is posted on the login side. And then finally, we post all of the information from each State Ombudsman conference on this login side. So each session with each PowerPoint, all of the resources that went along with that session are posted here. And again, at any point, if you have questions about where a resource is located, or if you have a resource that you would like to share with your fellow State Ombudsman, please feel free to reach out to the center. Another quick thing, and this is on the home page, if you want to be signed up to receive, State Ombudsmen are automatically signed up, but if you want to direct any new local or any new ombudsman in your program to receive updates from the center, including the Ombudsman Outlook, which is our quarterly e-newsletter, they can join our email list from the home page here. And you may have also seen we've been sending out announcements lately that if you want to receive The Voice, which is the Consumer Voices weekly newsletter, you can do so by signing up on the Consumer Voice website. And ombudsmen are no longer automatically added to that list. So if you have new ombudsmen and they want to receive The Voice from the Consumer Voice, which contains news items around long-term care issues, a lot of information about laws and regulations and advocacy tips that the Consumer Voice is working on, they'll have to sign up on the Consumer Voice website. Okay, so Amity, I think that is all I was wanting to cover for the NORC website.
Great, thank you so much, Aaliyah. Just give me 1 second and I'll change it back to my screen. Okay, great. So now I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into some of the resources that Aaliyah showed you how to find on our website. So as she said, I was going to talk a little bit more about the self-evaluation and continuous quality improvement tool. This tool, as she showed you the link, it is available on the new State Ombudsman webpage that we created, and it's also available at that link that I have on this slide. It's important to note that there is a tool for both state ombudsmen that are managing a statewide program as well as local ombudsmen that are managing local programs. As you know, your responsibility is program management and oversight of a statewide program, which for decentralized programs means that supporting local programs to ensure consistency and effectiveness is part of that responsibility. So as part of perhaps orientation of new local staff ombudsmen, whether they're program managers or maybe during an annual evaluation or assessment, you could share this tool with them and encourage them to use it to evaluate their own program. It's reiterated several times in the tool and the resources that accompany this tool that this is not to be used as an evaluation. So say a AAA director is not to use this tool to run down the program and identify areas for that point or that type of evaluation. It's really a self-evaluation and assessment that the program manager is supposed to do. So as Aaliyah said, there are 13 different components, and within those components there are what are called indicators. So what we did is we created some mini tools, because when you really look at the entire tool, it is rather comprehensive. The entire point is for it to be comprehensive so you can evaluate every aspect of your program. But it can be daunting, especially if you are a new state or local ombudsman doing this. So we created these mini tools. It's 2 pages long, and it takes every single component and drilled down into 3 indicators. So we tried to identify 3 really important indicators within each component, so a state or local ombudsman can quickly assess and identify their priority areas for improvement, as well as those areas where they're doing really well. So this is available as both a state ombudsman version and a local one. And also to guide you through how to use these mini tools, we've created instructional briefs, both a state and local version, and we have a webinar recording that's available on that page, the link that I had on the previous slide. The webinar recording was done to provide an overview of how to use both the comprehensive tool and the new mini tools, and you hear directly from state and local ombudsmen about how they use the tool in their programs. So it's a really great webinar to review, and it's something that you could share with your local programs in order to support their work. The NORC compendium, Aaliyah also mentioned this as well, especially the online version that we now have for the state ombudsman compendium, but I wanted to bring this up as well as a way for you to support your local programs. And if you don't have local programs, if you're a centralized programs, you can still use the online curriculum or the modules that are provided in the PDF version as part of your either initial certification training for ombudsmen, both staff and volunteers, or maybe even, as we've suggested and a lot of programs have found really useful, as perhaps pre-work before orientation. So for example, if a potential volunteer contacts your program or a local program and says they're interested, but you won't be able to do their orientation or initial training for a few days or weeks, it'd be helpful to send them a link to this curriculum, and they can do maybe Module 1 and really get a really good feel for the history and the purpose of the Ombudsman program and see if it's going to meet their needs. And that way you're weeding people out before you invest a lot of time and work in that individual. So, and there's also technical tips for the online curriculum, and as was mentioned earlier, state ombudsmen have a password in order to access the quiz scores, and you can contact our office for that information. Another helpful tool on our resource, or on our website, is the Are You a New Ombudsman page. Now this is different than the new state ombudsman page. This is specifically for any ombudsman, whether you're staff or volunteer. This would be really helpful for you to share with incoming local program managers, staff ombudsmen, and even with volunteer ombudsmen, to kind of be a warmer welcome to NORC, what we have and what we can provide to them, and really to demonstrate and remind them that they are part of a larger national network of advocates. And it provides a lot of information on this page about the history and role of the program, reiterating that the Ombudsman is a resident advocate, and gives some links to additional information and training. So that is a good web page to share. And Aaliyah mentioned the Ombudsman Program Management Highlights. Like she said, we do update this every year at the annual State Ombudsman Training, but I wanted to show you a screenshot of what it looks like. This was created by the NASOP Training Committee a few years ago, and we update it every year, and not just if your program changes, but we also add additional rows to collect information based on the type of technical assistance requests that we receive throughout the year. But this is a really handy snapshot, especially for new state ombudsmen, to identify programs similar to yours in structure, perhaps centralized, decentralized, or within a state unit or not. And that way you can speak with that state ombudsman if you're having issues in an area about contracts with a AAA or legal counsel, something in that area. So it helps you really identify some contacts other than your mentor and NASOP that can provide you the information you need. And Aaliyah talked about how we do record our webinars. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and provide some suggestions on how to use our webinars. If you can't attend live, obviously we do have them on our website, the recordings and the additional resources, but we encourage you, if possible, to maybe even host some live viewing sites. So across your state, encourage local ombudsmen to register for the webinar and then invite their volunteers or staff into, maybe if they have a large conference room or something of that nature, to view and participate in the webinar together, because that is a great opportunity for a lot of people to be trained on a specific issue, and then maybe even after the webinar they could have a debrief and talk directly with their program manager and staff ombudsman about what was discussed in the webinar. So certainly circulate our information and encourage participation. Another way that you as a state ombudsman could use this, depending on what the issue or topic is for the webinar, you could add this to your certification training process, especially if you're trying to do some off-site, and then gather together in person to kind of debrief over what they learned whenever they watched it at home or in their home office. You could use this as continuing education. So especially if staff or volunteer ombudsman can't make it to an in-person training, perhaps you could share the link to this webinar and then talk about it afterwards, and that would count towards their continuing education. Another area you could use this is for coaching ombudsmen. Perhaps you're having some complaints about an ombudsman's behavior whenever they're out in the field, or maybe you are concerned about a conflict of interest or maybe an ethical issue, and we have a webinar on that. Then you could use that, have the person watch it, and then talk about it with them as part of their coaching in order to bring them back in line with the role of the Ombudsman program. So we have a lot of resources, as you saw when Aaliyah was going through the website, but I wanted to touch on kind of how we package this information for you. So we have a variety of things. We have these relatively new technical assistance briefs that we've pulled together based on responses that we provide to state and local ombudsmen that contact our office. We try to keep the briefs to 2 to 3 pages. And those are available on that website. And we will have some new ones posted shortly that are in the near final review phase. We also have a technical assistance guide, which is a bit longer, maybe 6 to 8 pages. There's one about responding to allegations of abuse. We have best practices, not just the older best practice kind of reports or guides, which are 20, 25 pages, sometimes 30 pages long, which is a compilation of best practices that state and local programs were doing around, say, confidentiality or something, an specific issue. We also have best practice sections on the bottom of our issue pages and other pages throughout the website to give some really concrete best practices that state and local programs are doing. We also have quick reference guides. We have quite a few of those, and those are on average about 5 to 6 pages. So in between the TA brief and the TA guide, we have these quick reference guides. We have one on systems advocacy, both for state ombudsman and one for local ombudsman. That quick reference guide would actually complement any kind of continuing education program or maybe even initial certification training that you have with your staff and volunteer ombudsman to explain what systems advocacy is, why ombudsmen are responsible for it, and then provide some examples of what they could do statewide or locally, of course, in conjunction with your work. We also have one on working with individuals with mental health conditions and an ethical guide for ombudsmen. And then, of course, we have the Ombudsman Outlook, which is a quarterly e-newsletter. The link is on the slide that'll take you to the previous issues. We have another one coming up early this fall, but please not only share this with your local and volunteer ombudsman, but also let us know what you're doing in the field so we can feature some of your successes and maybe even challenges in the type of resources and information that we provide in this newsletter. And Aaliyah showed you the page that the NORS training resources are on. I just wanted to reiterate that there are 4 modules. The 3 C's, case, complaint, consultation. Second one's about coding complaints. The third one's about verification, disposition, and closing cases. And the last one's about activities. Each module has the slides from the webinar, the quizzes that people can take, the actual curriculum material, and then the webinar recording itself. These are excellent webinars and groups of training material that you can work through with your program. There's also information, Q&A responses from questions that went to the work group to improve NORS consistency. That's a whole separate page that links to from our NORS training page, and that link is on the slide. So this is really helpful information, especially for new state ombudsmen that are really trying to wrap their mind around entering NORS data. And we also have a Train the Trainer session that I think was at a Consumer Voice conference a few years ago, and it was recorded, and that's really helpful to watch too in order to train your local representatives whenever they are training their volunteers and staff and submitting these reports. So that is all I have for you today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lori so she can talk about current and future NORC work. And Lori, let me unmute your line. Just 1 second. All right, you're unmuted.
Great. Thanks, Amity, and nice to be with you all this afternoon. As you can tell, we have a lot of resources that have been developed over the years from the good work of the Resource Center staff like Amity and Aaliyah and Sarah Hunt and Jenny Coyne and Maria Green, who you all have met over the last few months and years of working on these different issues. And each year we develop a work plan that's done in conjunction with the Administration for Community Living, which really guides the focus of how we spend our time here at the Resource Center. And that work plan has been developed from the proposal that we wrote to acquire the grant from the Administration for Community Living. And really the charge for the Resource Center is to provide training, technical assistance, and support to state and local ombudsman programs, to promote the programs, to raise awareness about the program, and also to share information with you all about issues in long-term care, but also to share information about the Ombudsman program with other entities, with other organizations and programs, and with consumers. And so our work plan focuses around many of those issues. Some of the basic day-to-day work, kind of that we call it, revolves around providing technical assistance and responding to those requests that we get from state and local ombudsman programs. As we've mentioned to you in the past, you can call us really with any issue that you have, and we'll help work through it with you, help identify resources, and provide responses to whatever the issue is that might be that you or your staff are facing. And so that is a really big component of the work that we're doing. And then generally we include information about different training opportunities that we'll work on during each grant year, such as developing the state ombudsman training in the spring. We work on developing sessions for the Consumer Voice Conference each fall, and then do different types of webinars, new state ombudsman orientations like this call is part of, and also we do training specifically for state ombudsman programs that seek to do specific work with us on particular issues. So there's a range of different opportunities that are made available. We do try to post all of the work that we produce, all of the trainings that we produce whenever possible, and post them to the website, since that is really a good conduit of information for state and local ombudsmen, where you can just go and download whatever information it is that you need. And if you have specific needs, you certainly can contact us. The publication of the Ombudsman Program regulations earlier this year has really, as with you all, taken a lot of your time. It's also been an area that is of increasing focus for the Resource Center staff as we work to prepare materials and resources and organize it in such a way that we hope will be most useful to you as you are working within your own states to establish compliance in each area with the regulations. And we do know that each of the states is at a different place in terms of what it is that you're focusing on, what issues you need to pay the most attention to, and so we are trying to organize the materials in such a way that will be hopefully most useful to you. And some of the things that we've been doing around that are providing direct technical assistance to some state ombudsmen that have been having specific questions, pulling examples of policies and procedures or memorandums of understanding, for example, on how other states handle particular issues. We've been working on facilitating dialogue among state ombudsmen around the sections of the regulation in coordination with NASOP. In fact, the next dialogue call is going to be during the NASOP Open Member call on Thursday afternoon of this week, so we hope you'll attend that. We've been participating in different presentations on the regulations with Becky and or Louise. We were at the N4A conference earlier this year. We're going to be at the HCBS conference next week. There'll be a session at the Consumer Voice Conference coming up. There have been several webinars that have been held that ombudsmen have been invited to, but also for AAA directors and state unit directors. So working on the regulations is an area that we will be paying particular focus to over this next grant year, which started in June of this year, and we'll be spending quite a bit of our time and technical assistance in that area. But there are other topics that we do focus on and are paying attention to, specifically related to supporting ombudsman program advocacy in different care settings. So we've been working on a compendium around residential care and advocacy in that arena, looking at managed care and the dual integration projects, and are exploring ways that we can provide additional assistance to you all in advocacy around those areas. And then we also work closely with other advocates and other folks who are working on long-term care issues and other agencies and programs to look at how we can best share information or work on collaborative efforts. So we've been working on supporting collaborations with legal services providers, with protection and advocacy groups, and with other partner groups and organizations, and have been sharing some of that information with you all over the last several years. Actually, years is right, because we've been working on those projects for even as of the last grant cycle or two, and we'll be continuing to help promote some of those relationships moving forward as well. Another area that we're watching very closely and looking at how we can best support your work is also around the proposed revisions to the nursing home regulations that you've been hearing about. Consumer Voice and NASOP are working with others around that area, and the Resource Center has been monitoring some calls that have been taking place and some conversations about the changes in the regulations. Amity just sent out within the last day or so some information about the proposed regulations in terms of references to ombudsman programs, and we'll be sharing and forwarding information from both NASOP and Consumer Voice about different issues that are being identified in those regulations that ombudsmen might want to pay attention to. So we're trying to make sure that you're getting the information that you need in order to base your advocacy work on behalf of residents. So those are some of the things that we are working on in the current grant year and looking forward to as we move into the second and third year of our grant cycle. You all sadly received an email from Aaliyah who mentioned to you that she was moving on to a new opportunity. We're really going to miss her. So her last day is on Monday the 31st. We are going to be transitioning and looking for a new staff person to work with us on Resource Center projects, and we'll be sending out a job description and accepting resumes, and that'll be coming over the next week or so. But certainly Aaliyah has been a tremendous part of our team, and we will definitely be missing her as she moves on. But as we always like to say in the ombudsman world, you might leave your current job and move on to something else, but you're never quite gone from our network and from our family, and we'll always look forward to having her come back and work with us. So with that, Amity, I'm going to turn it back over to you to move on to the next part of the program.
Thank you, Lori. So the next part of our program, we're going to open it up for some Q&A. I do have some discussion questions for you all, but I wanted to take some time to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you have, whether it's about our next work plan, any information on our website, anything that you have. We have Aaliyah, Lori, myself, and Sarah on the line, so we'd like to hear from you. So if you want to either raise your hand and then I can unmute your line, or you can send in a chat question. Either way works. And Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So like you said, if you could just mute it on your line, on your phone, that'd be great. So do we have any questions? While you're thinking about your questions, I can ask you some. I'd like to hear from new state ombudsmen first. We'd like to know how you have used the website, and or if there's any particular kind of go-to NORC resource that you found really helpful. So if there's any resource you've used, maybe in your ombudsman training for your staff or volunteers, or if there's just one resource you really feel like is your go-to. If you could share that information, that'd be helpful to your peers on the line. You can either raise your hand or send in a chat message. Okay. Well, if we don't have any new state ombudsmen that have any responses to that, do we have any experienced ombudsmen, any mentors on the line that want to share a resource that they found particularly helpful when they were a new state ombudsman, or something, one of the resources maybe I mentioned earlier, and if you use that with your program and your training? Okay, well, I'll share an example that I heard from Texas. They used the brief that we created, the technical assistance about responding to allegations of abuse. They're using that language and a lot of information from that whenever they're looking at their policies and procedures and making changes due to the new regulations that came out, the final regulations for the Ombudsman program. So I thought that was great to hear and very interesting. Another example would be that folks use the NORC curriculum, the Ombudsman curriculum, as a core to developing their training materials for their staff and volunteers for their own state curriculum, and then they just add in their state-specific program information. So that's another way. Oh, Melanie, I see your hands raised. I'll go ahead and unmute your line.
Can you hear me through my computer?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to let folks know that we have used the training materials, like the history of the program and things like that. We've asked our staff, our new staff ombudsmen that are beginning their certification training, to look at that before they come to our class, so we don't have to cover it. So that's been really helpful.
Oh, great. And are you asking them to look at the online piece of it before coming to your class?
Yes.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. Anyone else have something to share?
Amity,
Yes.
This is Sarah. If I could jump in. One of the things that is another use of the website resources, sometimes programs will download policies and procedures and adapt them for their own state. And thinking about the policies and procedures as well as the curriculum and other documents on the website, we often have those in a Word version as well as the PDF that's what is usually posted online. So if you want to adapt something for training purposes or your program purposes, if you contact us, often we can send it to you in another format, so it's easier for you to extract the pieces that are most applicable for your purpose. And I guess one other update is always check the website for new resources as well as updated versions, especially for the NORC training. Sometimes questions will arise or someone will challenge an answer that's part of a quiz, and we always deal with one of the committees for the National Association of State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Programs, but also, and most importantly, with Louise Ryan with ACL, Administration on Aging. And once or twice we have tweaked the language or the answer on one of those quizzes. So before you use the NORS training in your state, just make sure that what you're about to use is the latest version of what we have online.
Thanks, Sarah. Both really important points. Appreciate it. All right, Joe, I see your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you. All right, go ahead.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. I'd like to echo what Sarah said about the NORS consistency training modules. We use them here in California and do webinars for our local programs. We do one webinar, or rather 2 webinars a quarter. We repeat it. And we just cycle through those 4 consistency modules throughout the year. And at the beginning of the year, we start back up again, knowing that people come and go. There's always a turnover of staff and volunteers. And it's a great way of getting this content out to local programs in a very accessible manner.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Joe.
Sure.
All right, those are all excellent tips. Thank you so much. If there aren't any additional tips about just using the NORC website or specific resources, or does anyone have any questions for us while we're on the line? If you don't feel comfortable asking a question now, you know how to contact us, and we'll respond, email, phone, however. Just let us know what you need and we'll help you out. We are certainly here for you. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. If a question comes up, feel free to send a chat message or raise your hand and we can still address it. I wanted to leave you with a few reminders. We will have an evaluation for this webinar and I'll send that out to you via email. I'll send you a link as well as a link to this recording once it's posted online. We'd also like to know, as Aaliyah said earlier, we update our website, we create content for our Ombudsman Outlook and our technical assistance briefs, and a lot of our resources depend on information from you, not just best practices, but also the challenges that you're experiencing in the field. So please communicate with us, let us know what's going on, share any new curriculum, any new in-service training, anything that you create for your program and your program representatives so we can share it with the larger network. Also let us know if you have anything specific that you want us to address in the next in-person orientation. That session is going to be Wednesday, November 4th, 8 in the morning to noon in Arlington, Virginia. It is immediately before the Consumer Voice Conference. So we hope to see many of you there. If you have anything that you would like to address, please let us know because we're developing the agenda right now. Well, I don't see any hands raised or any chat messages, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out right now. Thank you so much, Aaliyah and Lori and Sarah, for presenting today and or answering questions during the Q&A and sharing some tips. I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And again, welcome, new state ombudsman. Ask any question that you have. I guarantee that someone's asked that same question before, so you're not alone. It's an excellent network to be a part of. So thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon, and this will be posted shortly. Take care.